Omar, let me come to you for the last comments. Your scholarship as an anthropologist, including your essay in this volume, details the means by which Afghanistan emerged, thrived, and survived as a nation, even in moments like the one after 1989, when the state itself collapsed. Many people look at Afghanistan in this moment and they fear that it sits on the precipice of another such collapse. Can you tell us how you assess the health of the Afghan nation in this moment? And which pockets of the society do you see as carrying a sense of national attachment that can weather these difficult times? In your essay, you note that no Afghan faction, including the Taliban, has ever sought to break apart Afghanistan. And I wonder if you think this resilient sense of connection could be the basis for a more stable, sovereign government and lasting peace going forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Polly. I mean, as a last speaker, I know most of the important things have already said by the other speakers, but first, I'm very privileged to be here with some of the kind of major scholars and politicians who have played an important role in, especially in the post-2001 Afghanistan life, which I was kind of part of it, and I grew up especially reading and listening and to Ambassador Brahimi and others somehow. So it's a privilege for me to be here in this service. Now, the question is kind of a tricky question because if I understood it right, the assumption right now is that we are actually fragmenting again across the ethnic lines. And that is the reality of at least the other side of the line, the anti-Taliban forces. But I can say that in the context of the book and in the context of what I'm experiencing today here as an anthropologist, I believe that there is absolutely a consensus across all ethnic groups in Afghanistan, within the North and South, about not letting Afghanistan turning into something, another bloodbath, another kind of a go back to the dark era of the Taliban period. People remember that. Now, I see also that for a lot of internationals and for a lot of nationals here, they somehow see the palace as representing, for instance, one ethnic group and Taliban representing another ethnic group, or like the power is technically divided across the ethnic lines. First, in my opinion, in Kabul right now, what is sitting as a government, I don't see them as kind of representing sort of a, for instance, Pashtun constituency or a Taliban representing Pashtun group and stuff, as much as the other groups kind of representing the entirety of their groups. What we're actually facing is today is the consequences of about 20 years of mismanagement and sort of misperceptions about Afghanistan. Remember that when we were on the verge of drafting our first constitution, people, both internationals and our experts here, in a way, they didn't want to trust the local wisdom and the people's sort of intelligence to allow some level of devolution of power. So the people in the localities actually have the right to select or elect their governors, their mayors, and their representatives for the government. And they thought that in a way, instead they somehow mostly kind of relied on the most available strongman or another crony from Kabul administration to literally put on them. And at the same time, the way that the law, the constitution of Afghanistan was organized is like they didn't allow 20 years ago for the political parties to actually compete as political groups for the government. So the natural sense that, in a way, the natural space in which the people, irrespective of their kind of locality, for them to kind of mobilize themselves and in a way channel their frustrations was to go through the locality. Use ethnic, use sort of regional or sectarian sort of a space in which to kind of express themselves. And so what we're seeing today is one of that. On the other hand, what we're seeing today in Kabul right now, in the confrontation between different political groups, including the people in the palace. As Dr. Omar says, the triumvirate, I don't know how to pronounce it, the Republic of the Free People and stuff, is actually also a contest about the channeling of the resources and power. This is a moment of crisis in a sense, and these groups want to take power. And so in a way, the ethnic, and because of the lack of any other political sort of establishment, ethnicity, at least on the surface, somehow become a narrative through which the elite in Kabul, in a way, bargain about division of power and stuff. At the same time, what we see, that whole ethnicization of politics in Afghanistan was not something that is completely on to come from the Afghans. In 2002, when the international community came, a lot of us actually didn't even know how to speak English, let alone be able to express ourselves what we want. So the assumption was Afghanistan is sort of a Balkan. And then even like our original communities, I remember the General Musharraf, the former dictator of Pakistan, actually came in 2003, I suppose, and actually called the Taliban as representative of the Pashtuns. While the Taliban may come from the Pashtuns, but actually they do not represent the Pashtun majority or the Pashtun groups in general and stuff. So, and the people bought it. I remember like even officials, both in the internationals and within the Afghan government, which was predominantly in that time was ruled by the Afghan diaspora, would actually saw the Taliban as the Pashtun sort of a representative of the Pashtuns. And that sort of discussions continued. Now, 20 years later, where are we standing today? Now we have a voice. I see absolutely, and based on my working with as a professor, seeing that there is a sort of a constituency across ethnic lines, across sectarian lines, about preserving like the democracy and the civil rights that we have. And not because it's just simply come off with the intervention of the internationals in 2001. We have a century of sort of like that type of movement, and the height of it was 50s and 60s. And that assumptions, and now the international community are about to leave, at least they have to live with that kind of an assumption that that sort of movements are not just emerged in 2002 in order to be silenced and completely destroyed after their departure. That will definitely continue, in my opinion. Now, will we collapse into ethnic lines? What is actually clear, that the extreme centralization of all the authorities in every decision making by a small group of people, palace or in Quetta Shora, in both cases, and not leaving a space for the different kind of diverse communities of Afghanistan to actually have a voice in terms of like what they want, obviously may sound from the outside. It obviously may trigger this more of a crisis and stuff, and in a way give this image that we are completely fragmented across ethnic lines. But also, based on our kind of understanding of history and how Afghanistan emerged, specifically as a nation state, it kind of says that to no ethnic group, if at first I don't see Afghanistan as like made of ethnic blocks in which like they compete like Serbs and Croats and Bosnians and Albanians and others. That sort of things, that the merger, the kind of the connection between different groups in different regions of Afghanistan is far more organic. And the Taliban may push that idea that we are sort of, though they never sort of take that flag of like, oh, we are completely standing for a specific ethnic group. But they target, for instance, the Shia community in Afghanistan to actually further sectarian things. But even with the vicious and inhumane attacks that happened, we don't see any sectarian things, sectarian crisis among Sunni and Shias. We actually see that a lot of Sunnis take and with the Shia community in Afghanistan. So the picture is not just ethnic blocks of fighting each other. What we are facing is today that there is a consensus among majority of the Afghans, irrespective of their ethnicity, about kind of about this living in a civil society, in a civil sort of environment, and that will continue whether international helps us or not, but I hope very much they help us, because it's the crisis of Afghanistan, the tragedy of Afghanistan is not just for the Afghans, it's also for the world. And I think the 9/11 actually proved that once. Thank you.